Hello and welcome to today's webinar, What's New with Harmony 7? A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You're welcome to submit questions at any time using the chat window on your screen. We'll address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions, someone will follow up with you shortly via email. If you're interested in trying out the enterprise version of Harmony or applying to be part of the Topics Preview program, please send us a request in the chat window and someone will contact you after the webinar to follow up. We'll also make a recording of the webcast available within a couple of days. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Richard Poole, Chief Technology Officer of EMEA at Harmony. Richard heads up the pre-sales team for Harmony across the EMEA and Asia Pacific regions, working both directly with key accounts as well as Harmony's partner channel. Bringing with him almost 20 years of experience in data management systems, Richard has helped many companies to realize the significant benefits in productivity that collaborative platforms enable. Before joining Harmony in 2011, Richard worked for Dassault Systems PLM for over 10 years. Richard also has a Bachelor of Engineering degree in Automotive Engineering from Loughborough University. Richard, please get us started.
Thank you very much, Susan, and hello and welcome everyone. So we'd like to actually start off the session today, which is really focused on obviously the new updates that we've just released actually across the board. Not only in the Outlook rich client of Harmony, but also in some other interfaces as well. So we'd just like to ask you a first poll question.
So if you could let us know, are you accessing your Outlook from your desktop, a web browser, or your mobile device? And you can select all that are relevant. It'll help Richard to have an idea what kind of audience we have. And we'll just keep this for a minute open. Okay. There you go. So Richard, this is what you can see today.
Okay, excellent. So obviously the vast majority mainly use their desktop, which is no surprise, but it looks like almost half of the audience also use Outlook on a mobile device as well, and that's not unusual. Obviously, you know, like the latest Outlook versions for iOS and Android are very much coming up to speed in terms of functionality and usability, rather than necessarily maybe using like the built-in mail clients and things to the device. So the good news there is that, as I mentioned, Harmony is available both on or across desktops, web interfaces, and now also in Outlook Mobile. So the first thing that we'd like to kind of highlight is that Harmony has refreshed the kind of logos, icons, and interface of the interfaces. So we've actually implemented the new fluent design of Office 365. So it's really in line with the latest kind of Outlook updates, as well as the latest kind of SharePoint and Office 365 interfaces as well. So we'll have a look at that just in a moment, but also we'll take a look at some of the other interfaces in terms of Outlook in a browser and also Outlook in a on a mobile device. So if I just switch to my Outlook on my desktop, you'll see straight away that the icons that we're using across the board in Harmony, whether it's in the menus that you're using, when you're navigating around, for example, when you're drilling into a document library, and the folders or document sets and the list items and things have all been updated and refreshed so that now it's very much a kind of modern interface. And as I say, the menus in Harmony are kind of tied into the kind of icons that that Microsoft has been pushing out via the latest versions of the Office client. So even, you know, like in the options menus and things of Harmony, you'll notice that that interface has been updated and refreshed to reflect kind of the latest look and feel of the Microsoft environment. As I said, we're also extending that to the Outlook web access and also Office applications as well, which you may or may not be aware of either as a existing Harmony customer or a prospect that's looking to utilize Harmony. It is also available in a web interface and also available for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint applications as well, in which we've added in Harmony 7 support for Teams across the board, with again a refresh on the icons and the UI, but also being able to do that and capture, for example, emails and attachments directly from Outlook on a mobile device as well, which is really kind of a very key use case that if you're used to doing that on the desktop with Harmony, being able to do that also from a mobile device and capture the header information of emails, for example, add a category and upload the content, but also actually sending links and attachments via emails that you're actually composing as well. So just to illustrate those interfaces as well and the use cases of those, if we actually switch to a browser interface first, we can see that if I'm accessing Outlook in a web interface, I also have the capability to actually select an email. So in this case, I might be reading an email and I want to save that to SharePoint. Then I can click on the action menu there and select Harmony, which will load the OWA app and allow me to save the email or an attachment or multiple attachments if the email has those attachments, and go through that process. And you'll notice that, like we have done on the desktop interface of Harmony, we now support Teams as well. So for example, I can click on the Manage Teams there and see a list of all the teams that I'm a member of. I've chosen some relevant ones for today's session, and I can use those to actually save my content to as well, whether it's the email that I'm saving or the attachment, and then I can go and navigate through kind of like the structure there. Likewise, if I want to actually do that on a mobile device, if I just bring up my iPhone on my screen here for a second. You can see that I have the Outlook app for iOS installed, and I'm obviously reading an email maybe. And now I actually want to save that email to SharePoint. You'll see now if I've enabled the app, I have the option straight from the action menu there to actually save that email or the attachments to SharePoint, and again go through that process of saving that content. So if I select the email there and select a location, you'll see that I have all the same locations that I had on both my web interface, but also my desktop as well. So we're synchronizing those with your user profile, but also pulling those down from your profile. So for example, your OneDrive, your SharePoint sites that you're following, and the teams that you're a member of as well. And when I go through and capture an email, for example, like the desktop Harmony application, it will map across the header information from those emails that you're capturing, and also allow you to fill in any additional metadata as well. So let's just go back to our slides there. So as you can see, we're really pulling together a common user experience across different interfaces. We're very aware that people aren't just tied to a desktop these days, and being able to capture emails, capture attachments, and send links and things from a mobile device is really important. So the next thing that we've really been focusing on with Harmony 7 is also improving the user experience when they first get Harmony. Now, some of you may have installed Harmony yourselves as a user and basically, add a connection to a site and go from there. In a larger deployment, it's very common that you may have pre-configured settings and some sites that you want to push out to all the users. So maybe adding, your Office 365 tenant by default. But for some people, it's good to kind of pre-populate the Harmony sidebar with their OneDrive, their Teams, the sites that they're following, and all those kind of things with a couple of clicks. So we've really focused, as I say, a lot of effort to make that as easy as possible and take you through a couple of click process, but actually guide you through that process as well, without the user having to necessarily choose which authentication method they need to use and all those kind of things as well. So if we just go to an environment where I've just installed Harmony. So I haven't configured anything on this machine. I've literally installed the client. I've downloaded it from my download area and installed it on the machine. So next time I restarted Outlook after that install, Harmony picks up the my profile from my Exchange profile that I'm connected to in Outlook. So in this case, I'm logged in as Fred Neal, and you'll see that Harmony gives me a nice friendly message to say that, I can save emails and attachments to SharePoint without leaving my inbox. Do you want some help setting that up? So I can simply click on the Get Started, but also there's some links there as well to some getting started videos and things from our website. So if I click on Get Started, it will then take me through that process. So even if you're not sure which option to select, then it guides you through that. But obviously, some people are connecting to SharePoint on-premise and some people are on SharePoint Online, or maybe you're connecting to both. But if we take the example of connecting to a SharePoint Online tenant, as I say, it's picked up my user profile from my Outlook, and it even knows who I'm logging in as. Obviously, I have the ability to connect with a different account if I need to, but it's just asking me to authenticate. So if I log in as that user and click sign in, then you'll see that it will resolve that user's environment based on their Office 365 account. It will add in their tenant, and it will also add in their OneDrive, the teams that user is a member of, any sites that user is following, as you can see here, and also any sites that maybe they've been pushed to the user as publish links, as you can see here. So you actually kind of saw that in real time, that it's retrieving all that information from my SharePoint profile. And again, there's some shortcuts there to see how Harmony actually works as well. So kind of getting started guide. But if I click OK there, I can start working with these locations. So if I want to save some content or work on content in my OneDrive, simply click on that. It's got Fred Neal's OneDrive here. Likewise, if I click on Teams and Groups, it will automatically show me any teams or groups that I'm a member of. Also, I can see any, as I say, sites that I'm following down here, and also any sites that have been pushed to me via the user profile service. You'll also see if you have used Harmony on another machine or in another interface and enabled the option to share your sites and favorites across your devices with this option here, they will automatically appear here as well. So that can also help with somebody moving maybe to a fresh machine or to a new operating system or something. Then it means that they'll get the same kind of sites and favorites that they previously had in Harmony as well. So with that, we'd just like to ask the next poll question, please.
Which is, does your organization have a requirement to retain important emails? Just yes or no. We give you a couple seconds to answer that. And we'll continue on. So real quick,
Okay.
Richard, so you can see.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. So, yeah, it looks like the vast majority of the audience do have a requirement to retain important emails. And again, it's not really surprising because whether you're, maybe in a legal department or in a project-based organization or pretty much any company really, there's always instances where you need to capture important emails, maybe emails that have kind of contractual connotations or emails that relate to kind of key events or key milestones maybe in a project and things as well. Obviously, there's other use cases for Harmony around kind of like document management as well. And again, if you're an existing customer, I'm sure you'll already appreciate that Harmony covers both kind of document management and email management capabilities. But for anybody new, it's worth kind of highlighting some of the use cases here. So seeing as the majority of you do have a requirement to retain emails, and that has been the case for a long time now, again, something that we're really heavily investing in at the moment is to add more intelligence to the ability of managing those important emails as well. So we're actually working on, and in Harmony 7, we're including kind of a pre-release of our topics interface, which is able to, in an Office 365 environment, actually analyze, the emails that you're reading and receiving, and identify key topics from those emails, and then use those topics to actually identify which emails should be saved to SharePoint, which ones are important, based on kind of natural language processing to do that analysis, to identify those kind of keywords and topics from your emails, but also suggesting where to save those. And also in an Office 365 environment, you may have obviously some content that has been saved to SharePoint, some emails, some previous emails, but also a lot of emails that are in your mailbox. So being able to actually bring those together, emails that are in SharePoint and emails that are in Exchange, and identify the ones that you actually may want to save to SharePoint in a single interface. So that's something that we're introducing at the moment, and I'd like to give a short demonstration of how that works. So for example, if I go to my other mailbox for a second, if I go to some emails that I'm reading here that relate to maybe a particular client or a particular case in this instance, or maybe a project, then I can see that Harmony has been able to, as I say, analyze that email to identify the key topics from it. So in this case, the case number or project number or whatever, but also the name of the client in this case. So if I click on that topic that's been identified, Harmony is then able to go and actually retrieve all the related content to that topic across my Office 365 tenant. So as a user, there may be, content in my OneDrive or content in Teams that I'm a member of, content in SharePoint that I'm using, or content in both email in my inbox, but also in those SharePoint sites that I'm connected to as well. So we've got the ability to kind of filter those to say, okay, if I'm just looking at emails in this case, I want to see a view of which emails that relate to Acme Consulting have been saved to SharePoint. And for example, I can, click on one of those and open it up directly from SharePoint into Outlook. So it's, as you may or may not know, Harmony stores those emails as fully contained MSG files, so I can reply to them and things like that. But equally, I've got some other related emails in my mailbox that haven't yet been saved to SharePoint. So by opening one of those, which is now being opened from my mailbox, I can say whether I want to save that to SharePoint or not. And when I click on the Save Message dialog here, we can see that actually we can suggest locations based on both my activity in Harmony as well as across my Office, other Office applications. So if I'm, working on a presentation in PowerPoint and that presentation is in a certain library, then that may come up here as a recent or suggested location. But also we can suggest those locations based on the topics that are identified. So because the case number in this instance was identified as a topic, Harmony is actually suggesting a SharePoint library, and in this case a document set in a particular library, because there's metadata that corresponds to that case number in that particular document set. So Harmony is really focused on really giving you the best possible capabilities to manage emails in the best possible way across both Exchange and SharePoint, across your entire Office 365 environment. So with that, we'd just like to ask another poll question.
So now that we've talked about it, where do your knowledge workers currently store their important emails? And please let us know, are they storing them in personal mailboxes and PST files, shared mailboxes or group mailboxes, public folders, SharePoint, or some different email management system that we didn't mention? And we'll see quickly what kind of answers, where people are storing their emails. Okay, Richard, let's show everybody. There we go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So it seems to be a reasonable split between basically your own mailbox or PST file and SharePoint. And I think, I think historically people have been doing that in their mailboxes and PST files, which is obviously not the ideal place to be storing important emails because they're tied up to that particular, just to the recipient, basically. But obviously, if you're working on a project or something, then a project may run for years, and the people involved in that project kind of move and change, and being able to actually retrieve the important emails that another colleague received that relate to a particular project, for example, is very, very important. And that's why SharePoint is a really good place to put those, so that you can manage them in a collaborative space, but also so that you can retrieve them easily as well, and then use the kind of Microsoft searching capabilities to actually find that content. Excellent. So thank you very much for your responses. One of the final things that we wanted to just highlight with Harmony 7 is we've added support for both Office 2019 on the client side, so Outlook, for example, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, but also SharePoint 2019 for on-premise environments as well. And obviously, we're always up to date with supporting Office 365 tenants. As part of that, we do need to discontinue the support for very old versions of Windows, Office, and SharePoint. I think most people have definitely moved away from these platforms now because they're not supported by Microsoft anymore either. And in fact, I don't think they've been supported by Microsoft for quite some time. But obviously XP, Office 2007 on the client side, but also WSS3, SharePoint Foundation, and SharePoint 2007 as well. So anything after that, then we do support, obviously. So 2010 onwards, basically, both on the client side and the SharePoint platform side as well. Just to note there, the SharePoint Foundation is Foundation 2007 that we're saying, not the later versions. So with that, we'd just like to leave you with one last poll question.
So please let us know if you're interested in being contacted by a Harmony representative. Was you're a customer who has questions, you'd like to trial Harmony, you just have questions, or yeah, no thanks, that was interesting. So, and while you're answering that, I will let Richard answer the questions you have asked. So, Richard, the first question has to do with topics.
Okay.
And it says they saw the topics button, now they don't see it. The functionality is now disabled. So, if they're interested in topics, can you show them where?
Yeah, that's a good point. So the topics mechanism, it has two components. It has the client side functionality, which basically you need to enable the option in Harmony, which is actually you have to enable via a registry key to enable that. But it needs to connect to the topic engine in Office 365. So it's actually a managed app which you deploy in your own Azure tenant. But as it's kind of early access at the moment, we would ask you to contact us if you're interested in taking a look at the topics functionality so that we can work with you to install the managed app in your tenant and then enable the mechanism in the client so that the client can talk to the managed app. So that's why by default the topics option is disabled at the moment. We're planning to make it GA in later this year in the next version of Harmony, but we are actively working with early adopters and customers who are testing out the topics capabilities.
Great, thank you. When you send a document to Teams, are you able to start a thread with the document?
We send a document to Teams. So, I mean, we're when we connect to a team, so if we just connect to my environment here as an example, so we can illustrate what we're talking about. So if we just minimize a few things and go into a team, for example, when I actually select a team here, it's going to show me the document, essentially the SharePoint documents that relate to that team. So I can capture content, I can work on that content directly from there in exactly the same way as it would be with connecting directly to a SharePoint library. So if there's functionality configured on the team, then that's going to be instigated by Harmony as well. So if I go, for example, to let's say our tech sales team there that I'm a member of, then the documentation is here, so I can carry out all the operations that I could do in SharePoint directly from here. So as I say, if there's kind of workflow or whatever enabled there that's going to kick off a certain event, that would take place from there. Obviously, you can capture emails, you can capture documents, you can work on them, and you can send content. We're not necessarily looking specifically at functionality about sending, say, a new email from a team, because that's more kind of Outlook functionality.
Okay, let's see. You mentioned the searchability of emails handled by Harmony. This person who's asking says, in their daily experience, the window search does not lead to useful results. Is it possible to use other way, or does Harmony have a search function which leads to better results?
So Harmony has two kind of search capabilities. First off is using the SharePoint Enterprise Search Service. So for example, if I go into, let's say, a site here and go to perform a search, then it's actually surfacing full text search using the enterprise search of SharePoint. So I can choose the context of that search. I can also add, custom result sources and things as well. So if I just want to search for, emails in a particular site or across multiple sites and things, then I can search in that way. But also coming into the kind of topics side of things, we're utilizing the Office Graph APIs to actually retrieve and search for content as well. And that can be done both via the kind of topics that we're identifying. So I can actually click into maybe like here, because obviously my own environment is focused around customers and accounts, then I can navigate via those. So actually identifying those topics that are relevant to me, so we can help you not have to kind of start typing what you're searching for, but actually navigating around it. So if I select Kia, who's a customer in the UK, I can see other related accounts or kind of initiatives and topics and things as well. But equally, I can actually search from here as well. So if I know that I want to search for, let's use the example of Kia again, then I can start typing ahead, and valid terms or topics are actually then shown to me as I type ahead. So for example, here, if I select the Kia group as a topic, it's going to show me anywhere where that information is found across my Graph API. So whether that's content in SharePoint, Exchange, my OneDrive or whatever, so I can see that I don't necessarily need to know or choose the location, even if it's between Exchange and SharePoint, but I can see that actually there's a lot of activity with this customer, so I can actually easily kind of drill down into the content.
Very nice. Is it possible to enable offline access to SharePoint hosted documents without having OneDrive?
No, we utilize the OneDrive sync client for offline synchronization because Microsoft have heavily invested in that over a number of years. And we don't really want to, we never develop anything that is competing with existing Microsoft capabilities. We always look to complement and utilize Microsoft capabilities wherever possible. So, for example, if I go into, let's say, a document library here, I can choose to synchronize that from here, and that will then do that via the OneDrive for Business Sync client, which is then available, obviously, in Windows Explorer. So, for example, here, because I added that construction site, I can now access that from Explorer, but also I can access it from Harmony when I'm disconnected as well. So if we click on my SharePoint local files there, you'll see the libraries that I'm synchronizing, in that instance, that construction library. And I can see the documents like I could in Explorer, but also I can still see the metadata and the views and things while I'm offline in the Harmony interface. So we're adding to the functionality that OneDrive for Business offers, which is the file synchronization, and we add to that by synchronizing the metadata. So for example, if it's a library where I've been saving emails, then I can choose a view that I've got configured there, which is showing specific email columns on that content that's being captured, whether they've got attachments or those kind of things as well. So as I say, we're always looking to utilize Microsoft capabilities and complement them and add to them rather than compete with them.
Great. Let's see. When connecting, I think this is referring to when you were showing how you connected the getting started, the onboarding. Mm-hmm. Does it give you the permission sets on SharePoint, say, for instance, a certain folder?
The permissions that Harmony uses is based on the user that you're connecting, you're authenticating as. So everything's security trimmed that you connect to. So you're only going to see the content that you have access to. But for example, if we just go back to that environment where we added this, you can see obviously I've got sites listed here. But if I then navigate into one of those sites, I'm obviously going to see the subsites and the libraries and the lists, but only the ones that I have permission to access in that particular instance. If we go back up a level actually to that locations view, you'll also see that I'm able to right-click on one of those sites that's been added automatically, maybe the root site of my tenant, but also I can discover any other site collections that I have access to as well. So the ones that were added here automatically are the ones that either I'm following or I've added via my profile. But all these other ones are ones that I may have permission to access. So I can choose to add, for example, this email project site into the sidebar as well. And by selecting that, and I can filter, and I can search for the sites that I want there, and then I can choose to add those into the sidebar as well.
Great. Can I decide to store the email and or the attachments?
Yes, absolutely. So if I just go back to this environment and say, okay, let's go to somewhere where I typically work. So we created actually a folder just for messing about with for this webinar. So we can see here, if I've got an email, I can just drag and drop that email into the sidebar and it will be stored as the email itself. If I have an email with attachments, I can choose whether I want to save the attachments separately or whether I want to save the email with the attachments together. So it really depends on what I drag and drop. So if I drag an email that has an attachments in, then it will store the attachments in the email. If I drag in the attachments themselves or use the contextual menus to do that, then you'll see that I can choose to save the attachments, and I can also choose to strip the attachments out of the email if I want to. So in this case, I'm just saving that email, but it might be that I want to, as I say, save the attachment and replace the attachment in the email with a link in Outlook. So you've got flexibility on what you do there, but our kind of like default operation is just to put a copy of that attachment. For example, if I'm dragging the attachment, in this case, I'm going to be prompted for the content type because this library has multiple content types. But also, if I save, as I say, the email with the attachments, then that will be how it's stored in SharePoint.
So this is basically a follow-up question asked by someone different, which is, can an email stored in Harmony be deleted?
Deleted from SharePoint or deleted from Outlook? But I realize that we don't know the question at the moment. So if you've got the permission to delete content from the library that you're browsing, then yes, you can. If you don't have the permission to do that, you won't have the option to do it in Harmony. If you want to actually move emails into SharePoint, i.e. delete the email from Outlook once that has been done, you can change the operation of what happens when you're saving content in the options here. So we can say, I want to move emails instead of copying them, in which case it will delete the email from Outlook after it's been successfully saved into SharePoint, so that it won't get lost in the kind of, in the interim. But also what it does then is it does an Outlook delete. So it puts it in, it moves it into your deleted items in Outlook. So obviously, depending on your kind of Outlook policies and things, you could go and recover that email in Outlook if you needed to as well. So I think, to cut to the chase on the question, if you've got permission to actually delete the email from SharePoint, you can do. If you're talking about Outlook delete, then Harmony has the option to do that as well.
Great. Let's see. I see Harmony on my desktop, but not on my mobile. Why?
Okay, so to add the Harmony app into Outlook on a mobile device, it is a Office app. So you just need to go to the Office App Store, which you can do from a browser interface or from a mobile device, and say, I want to add that app in. And now it's, as I say, it's available in the Office Store. You can add it individually from the Office Store if that's enabled in your tenant. If your admin allows you to add apps manually, or the admin can do that for you. If you add it first, it will give you some free functionality, which won't map header information, for example, much like the desktop. And then if you register your purchase license in the app, which again the admin can do for all users, then you'll get the full functionality of that. So basically, again, if you want to add the app, you need to go to the Office Store to do that. But there are instructions to do that on our website. So if I just bring up our website here, if you just scroll down to the bottom and click on support, you'll see that we have descriptions and documentation for the app, both for Outlook, but also for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and also an admin guide of how to actually enable that. So the step-by-step instructions are on how to do that basically there.
Thank you. Is the offline mode also available on mobile devices?
So for offline, on a mobile device, we're not doing that in Outlook. We're doing, because the integration, the app in Outlook is really in the context of a particular email, to save that email or the attachment and get it into SharePoint. So what we do have on mobile is the Harmony mobile app itself, which gives you rich access into SharePoint on, again, both iOS and Android devices. And if I've got my phone still displayed, there we go, we can see that I have the Harmony Enterprise app installed on my device as well. So if I tap on that app, it will give me, as I say, access to my SharePoint environment, and then anything that I browse to there, we can synchronize locally to the device. So, and it's more of a kind of granular selection of, do you want content to be synchronized offline? So for example, if I go to, let's say, a team or maybe a site in SharePoint, and go into even the area that we touched on earlier. So let's say this kind of document library that I was synchronizing to my desktop, then when I add something as a favorite here, you'll see I have an option to make that available offline. And as I say, since we can't necessarily integrate to a Microsoft capability there, we're utilizing our own technology to synchronize within the app here. So it will synchronize the metadata and the documents. And it could be not necessarily an entire library, but it could be like a view of certain content in a particular library. So for example, here, it might be like these legal documents, that it's just a particular set of content within a particular library. So it could be a filtered view or a particular matter or something like that. So it's not I need to synchronize the entire library to my device, but more a case of, okay, well, if I'm actually working, I know that I'm going to be working, let's say, remotely on a particular project, then I might want to synchronize the relevant project documentation so I can work on it from there. And we offer annotation capabilities, for example, for PDFs, and to allow to update the metadata and make changes to the documents and things. And we handle the synchronization when you go back online as well.
Thank you. Lots of questions, Richard.
Yep.
Does Are you planning on integration or a desktop client for applications other than Office to save in Harmony?
No, I mean we're really focusing on obviously the Microsoft environment. As I said, we have added integrations to Word, Excel, and PowerPoint as well. So that's something that, again, as a customer, you may or may not be kind of aware of if you're just using the Outlook integration. But for example, here you can see that, if I'm creating a new document and I want to save it to SharePoint, I can actually launch that app. And it's the same app that we're using in the Outlook web interface and Outlook mobile and things as well. So it's available both on the desktop, but also Office web apps as well. So even if you're using Word in a browser, or Excel and PowerPoint as well, then I can basically carry out the same type of operations as well. So in this case, again, if I want to save a document to SharePoint or a team or my OneDrive, I can do that from here. And I can browse around, which I think is slightly different to kind of what the built-in capabilities of Office are, where it's kind of giving you just the recent locations, for example, whereas here I can manage the sites that I want to appear in this list. I can manage the teams that I want to use, and I can navigate around as well. So, I can utilize the full capabilities of the platform from those client applications.
Okay. Does Harmony prompt users to populate required metadata when uploading to a library when it's essential to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. In all Harmony interfaces, if there's required properties, then the user will be prompted to fill that in. So for example, if we go back to Outlook for a second, then when I'm capturing, for example, a document, let's take a different document in this instance to this library. Then if there's required properties, let's say on this proposal content type, then the required properties will be displayed to the user. Anything that's required is highlighted with a red dot. So for example, here I may need to select a value for these particular properties, but also we can apply a filter just to display the required properties as well. So not all of the editable properties, but just the required ones. And that kind of helps users to stay focused on the important information. Now, obviously, if the user doesn't populate that, they'll get a warning to say that the document won't get checked in and won't be available to other users. So they can come back and fill that information in. So in this case, I need to say this is now in process or something, and I may need to select a particular solution value or something. And then when I hit save there, the document will get automatically checked in, and you'll see that Harmony supports, whatever versioning control you've enabled in the library as well. In this case, major and minor versions and things.
Great. A couple more questions. So if I'm using labels in Office 365, can they be used to classify emails and documents?
So labels is quite a hot topic at the moment, and it's something that we are looking to add more functionality around. Obviously, labels is a newish capability that's been introduced to Office 365 for kind of classification and retention purposes in both Exchange and SharePoint. And we're looking later this year to add support for that so that we can actually display them, but also allow the user to apply the labels, for example, to a document in SharePoint. However, if you're applying labels in Exchange via a policy, for example, those will still get applied when using Harmony. Likewise, if there's a policy on the library to apply a label, when a document is uploaded, that will get applied as well, because we're using standard web services to actually connect and interact with the libraries and the documents that we're actually working with there.
Right. Okay. This is a two-part question. I'm running an older version of Harmony, so where
Okay.
and how do I update? And once I update, can I sort the followed SharePoint sites alphabetically?
Okay. So yeah, first question, how do you get the latest version of Harmony? So you need to log into your download area of our website. You'll have a link to that as a customer in your order fulfillment email. If you need more logins or anything like that, then please contact us and we can add additional usernames and passwords and things. Obviously, it is a gated access to that as a customer. So once you go into that download area, you can download the latest version of the software as an MSI package, which can obviously either be installed individually or more commonly is pushed out via things like group policy in an organization. So once that's pushed out, you'll obviously be updated to Harmony 7, which is the latest build. And then to come on to the second question that you have there, the followed sites that you have here are ordered in the order that you have them in SharePoint in your profile. So because they're dynamic, if you follow something or unfollow it, then it will automatically appear here as soon as you refresh the view that we're actually retrieving that dynamically from your user's profile. So it is dictated by the order that you have them in your profile, but you can also add things as favorites in Harmony. So it could be a followed site, it could be a library, whatever, and then those favorites can be ordered in whatever way you want. So if you want to order those alphabetically, it's simply a case of clicking on the top of the column there, but also you can manage your favorites as well. So here you can say whether you want to change the order of how they're displayed and things as well, so you can move things up and down. So if I work in the accounts library in our SharePoint environment quite a lot, so I can change the way that that's displayed.
Okay, I'm going to go with just a couple more questions, and because we're coming up to the hour here. When you go back to the App Store, when you download Harmony in the App Store, do you choose for Office 365 or for Business?
So the app is only an app which you basically enable. There's not really anything to download in terms of the Office 365 store, but it's Office 365.
Great, thank you. And last question, how can I be notified when there's a new release?
Okay, that's a great question. So you can go to there's a very easy way. You can go to our website, click on the blog at the top of the main page there. You'll see that this gives announcements when there's new versions available or when there's events and things like that we're running. So you can just basically subscribe to our blog here, and you'll be notified whenever there's a new version or a new announcement on the blog.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Richard, for that great demonstration presentation. Thank all of you for joining us. It's possible I missed a couple of your questions. If that's the case, we will follow up with you afterward. Someone will reach out to you. You will get an email with a link to view the recorded webinar again within a couple of days. And we look forward to meeting you again at our next webinar. Thanks.